Our history, whether it's our personal stories or our collective narrative, it is so important in shaping who we are. So in the next segment of the program, we are going to hear from two individuals who have dedicated their careers to helping other people understand the complex history of Israel. Lenny Ben-David is a writer and an international consultant who served as Deputy Chief of Mission at Israel's embassy here in the United States. And he also opened up AIPAC's office in Jerusalem in the 1980s. My colleague David Kreiselman will interview Lenny about his most recent project, which has made him one of the largest and foremost collectors of historic photos in Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Lenny Ben-David and David Kreiselman.
Good afternoon, everyone, and hello, Lenny.
Hello, David.
The first time Lenny and I met was actually in the early 80s when both he and Minette Warnick put together the AIPAC office for the first time in Jerusalem.
My mentor at AIPAC was the founder of AIPAC, a man named Cy Kennan. Some of you may remember Cy Kennan. At the time, my name was Lenny Davis. I changed from my maiden name, and now it's Lenny Ben-David. I also want to comment on two people who are not here today because they couldn't make it from Los Angeles, also mentors of mine, Barbie and Larry Weinberg, for whom I want to dedicate this session. So I've been around AIPAC for a long time.
So I'm guessing this is not your first policy conference.
Certainly not, but again, some of those were really small, and we had some of the giants in the U.S.-Israel relationship, such as Scoop Jackson, who attended, Ted Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey. That's what your parents would have seen had they come. And of course, we also had some of Israel's heroes, such as Yitzhak Rabin, who came to speak to AIPAC. And we were very close with him because of his ambassadorship in Washington.
Tell us a little more about what you've been doing since you've been at AIPAC.
Because of Kennan, I've dedicated myself to defending Israel and Hasbara purposes. And so I've always been working in Hasbara at AIPAC, after AIPAC, with honest reporting. I left AIPAC in '97 and was appointed as the #2 diplomat in the Washington embassy. And then I've been doing consulting since. But I still look for the historical ties between Israel and the United States. I commend to all of you Michael Oren's book on that topic. But to give you an example, I found out that Bobby Kennedy, right out of college, came to Palestine as a cub reporter. He was 21 years old. His daddy didn't want him to come to Palestine, to the Holy Land. But he came and wrote for a Boston newspaper, 4 major articles. Those articles were lost when the newspaper went bankrupt. I found them and republished them, and you can see them on my website. And the family turned around and gave me these great pictures of Bobby Kennedy in Jerusalem.
So when did you really start Israel Daily Picture Project, and how?
I'm always looking for pictures that show the history of the Jewish connection and the American connection. I was looking up a document in the Library of Congress on U.S. policy towards settlements, and I came up with these words, Jewish colonies and settlements, and I had no clue what they were talking about. Jewish colonies. And I discovered more than 20,000 pictures in the Library of Congress archives that had been digitized. Subsequently, I found that thousands more in libraries all around the world. This is the digital age, and they're all digitizing their pictures. So I went looking, and I found pictures of Jewish colonies, such as this one of clearing sand dunes to build Tel Aviv, or this one, the next one of farmers presumably in the Galilee. There's no question, these are Jewish farmers. And I realized, ladies and gentlemen, that this is a visual proof of Jewish life here in Eretz Yisrael, in the Holy Land. we've all known it. Anybody who studied history, you know that the Talmud was written here. You know that great rabbis like Nachmanides lived here. But today we're being challenged on when Israel came. Was it only from the time of the Holocaust, or was it the time of Israel's founding? Here is visual proof in an old media that we can use today in the new media to show that Jews were always here.
This reminds me that Angela Merkel was just visiting Israel. What do you say about this picture?
This picture launched a group of Christians in Israel called the American Colony. A group of Christians who came from Chicago. They opened up a photography department. And they became like a news agency. When the Emperor of Germany came to Jerusalem, they took photographs. And this was in the Library of Congress. Friends, this picture was on a glass plate, which allows it to be expanded. And they're all online, and you have the ability to look at it yourself. I looked at this picture, and I said, wow, this is the Jewish arch to receive the German emperor. When I blew it up, I discovered not only the Hebrew writing, I discovered the the chief rabbis underneath the arch. I discovered Torah curtains under the arch, and where I can read exactly what synagogues they came from. And I went one step further, and as I blew it up, and I saw this picture. Look at what adorns this arch. Ladies and gentlemen, the Jews of Jerusalem emptied their synagogues to decorate this arch with the Torah crowns. Again, this is a Jewish community in Jerusalem that dates back centuries.
And it actually says Wilhelm Hasheni.
It was all in Hebrew to welcome and his wife, Wilhelmina.
So what about the first pictures that were taken in the area?
Photography started in the 1830s, and we've discovered pictures that go back that far. This, I believe, is the first picture showing Jews at the Western Wall, taken in 1853 by a watchmaker in Jerusalem called Mendel Dinas. And when you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, this picture was taken before Abraham Lincoln was president. The old rabbi in this picture probably dates back to the American Revolution. I found another picture by Dinas, very historic. This is Mishkanot Shananim while it's being built, and the Montefiore windmill. This is the first Jewish construction outside of the old city, all by Dinas. And then, ladies and gentlemen, Dinas and his photographs disappeared. I searched and found them and what happened with them. Dinas left the Holy Land, converted to Christianity, became an American preacher, lived in the States. This is his family. And his pictures were lost until about 1989, a photography buff going through some files in a garage sale in Minnesota found his pictures. And now these pictures are on my site. They're in the Harvard University Library as well.
Go ahead.
The Americans, such as Dinas later, were very important as well in this whole history. And this is an example why I bring. This is done by an American photographer. And it is a village outside of Jerusalem called Silwan. And I looked at this picture and I said, wow, or as we say in Israel, voila. This is a Yemenite Jew. And I showed it to Yemenite historians and they said, yes, not only is he a Yemenite Jew, they even knew what tribe he was from, the Haspani tribe, which shows the Jewish connection to Silwan in more modern times. The Yemenites of Jerusalem were a particular subject to the American colony, this group of Christians who came to Palestine. Of course, Palestine was known then as for the whole land, and Palestinian Jews were Jews of the land. The American colony came in 1881. 1882, a group of Yemenites, a large group came, and for the Christians from Chicago, it was almost messianic in terms. They saw the Yemenites, who they called Gadites, from the lost tribe of God, in messianic terms. And that's why they took these pictures. They even sheltered and fed the Yemenites of Jerusalem.
I think there were some more famous American visitors in the 19th century.
One of the most famous of the American visitors, and I'll tell you about one more even before, was of course Mark Twain. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't read Mark Twain's Innocents Abroad, shame on you, because he describes the Jewish community and he describes the area of the land, the Holy Land at the time. In going through the Library of Congress pictures, I believe, and I've also shared this with the Mark Twain Institute in California, that we may have found Mark Twain's colleagues from his trip. This picture was taken in 1867 by a British photographer who was in Palestine at the time with a British Exploration Foundation. He took this picture. Both Twain and the British explorers were staying at the Mediterranean Hotel in the Old City at the same time, which is why I believe that this may have been taken by the same photographer. We got another little hint when we blew this up, and I saw the lady's dress. On the left is one of the tourists in that picture. On the right is Olivia Twain. And turns out Olivia Twain was not on the trip. Her brothers were. But dressmakers among you or designers, take a look at the dress. We realized it was not bought at Macy's at the same time. It was probably made by the same dressmaker. But this is 1867. We've also got American interest coming even earlier. This picture is William Seward. I gave the hint that on the picture that he was the Secretary of State. Who else remembers Seward for the great purchase that he made? Alaska, Seward's Folly. Seward lost the nomination to presidency in 1859 because he was gallivanting around the Middle East. He returned in 1871 and wrote a travelogue of his visit. And friends, he came to Jerusalem, he prayed at the Western Wall, and some Jewish young man grabbed him and his party and took him into a synagogue. Same thing that happens to many today. It turns out from his description, and there's a great description, that he went to the Horva synagogue. In his book, he provides us a very important historic census of Jerusalem, where he says half the population of Jerusalem is Jewish, 1/4 Christian, 1/4 Mohammedan. This is Lincoln's Secretary of State providing us with this important documentation. This picture is of a telegram that I found in the files of the Joint. In it, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey sent an urgent 1914 document to Jewish tycoons in New York saying the Jews of Palestine are starving. They couldn't get their aid from Europe because they were in the middle of World War I. So they asked for money, and the first amount of money, $50,000, was sent to the Jews of Palestine. But how do you keep the Turks from stealing it? It arrived on a U.S. Navy boat called the USS North Carolina. 13 more U.S. Navy boats brought food and money to the Jews until World War I in the United States came in. But there's no question the United States then, 100 years ago, helped save the Jews of Palestine.
Okay, we have less than a minute. Okay, so let's see another two pictures here, and then I want to get to the
Jews at the time also enlisted in the in the British Army. Volunteers from Britain and Canada. There were as many as 500 soldiers who fought in World War I to liberate Palestine. That was the tie of the Americans and Israel. This is a congressional delegation to Jerusalem in 1936 to help the Jews of Palestine.
What would you say would be your conclusion of this? I mean, what's the relevance of all these fascinating photographs, but is there a message here that we can get out?
Friends, the message is something we've all known. Jews have always been in the land of Israel, in Eretz Yisrael, in then what was called Palestine. Jews were always there. Here we have the visual proof. Show these to the kids. Show these on the campuses. So we know that the Jews were always here. These were thriving communities with Ashkenazi, Sephardi, religious and non-religious Jews. It wasn't something that came out in 1948. It wasn't something that came out because of the Holocaust. It even predates Herzl. This is a part and parcel of the legitimization of Israel that we all need to be involved in knocking down the BDS canards against the Jews and the Israeli nation. Thank you very much.
I want to encourage you to visit the station that Lenny has out in the village, those of you who haven't seen it, for more incredible photographs. And Lenny, thank you.